on all of these developments. I'm joined now by Reza Marashi, who formerly served in the Office of Iranian Affairs at the U.S. State Department. He's now Research Director at the National Iranian-American Council. Reza, thank you very much for coming in. So looking at all that's happened over the course of the last 48 hours when it comes to Iran, are we closer or further from the prospect of military action against Iran's nuclear program?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction, a step away from military action. We know that negotiations are going to be taking place in the coming months, probably sometime in April, between Iran and the permanent members of the Security Council, plus Germany. And when negotiations are taking place, it's much more difficult for the Netanyahu government to push an agenda that's predicated on military conflict. And I think President Obama has done an exceptional job over the last 48 hours of really pushing back and really making it known, not just to the American people, but to the international community, that not only is loose talk about war irresponsible, but it's also the responsibility of those pushing a war agenda to let people know in their respective countries what that cost of war would be.
Okay, the alternative to the military path is that of sanctions and political negotiations. Sanctions have been toughened in Europe and here in the United States. The President mentioned it today. Do you think they're going to work in terms of changing the nuclear trajectory of Iran?
I think it's a great question. Sanctions do work in terms of raising the political costs for the Iranian government and making their life more difficult, and they certainly make life far more difficult for the Iranian people, who end up suffering the most. But we haven't seen a concrete example to date of sanctions changing the strategic calculus of this regime. If anything, it's hardened the heels. It's made the hardliners within Tehran dig in their heels and made them less amenable to compromise, because they fear that the policy is predicated on regime change as opposed to actually figuring out a compromise on Iran's nuclear program.
Okay, we've just been talking about the American election. Do you think it is possible in this heated political environment for the U.S. to really make these difficult decisions on Iran?
Great question.
Whether it were, military action or not?
Well, I think at the end of the day, political leaders are the ones that have to make tough decisions. They're the ones that have to take risks for peace.
But it's hard to do so in an election campaign.
It's hard to do so in an election campaign, but sometimes a problem gets to a point where you can't ignore it anymore. And I think that's the point that we've reached with this Iran issue is right now there's nothing left to sanction. Once oil and gas sanctions kick in this summer, the EU embargo, there's really nothing left to sanction. And when you don't have anything left to sanction, you really only have two options left, which are sustained negotiations where real compromises are made and you're investing in that process, or you have a military conflict. And that's why I think the President has come out and been unequivocal in the statements that he's made over the last 48 hours about which process he prefers to invest in right now, even though the political risk and the political costs are high because we are in an election season right now.
Very briefly, Reza, which of those two paths do you think America is going to end up pursuing?
I'm confident that America will pursue peace. Having ended one war and still engaged in another, I don't think there's any appetite for a third, and that's one of the things that helped bring Barack Obama into office, and I think he'll keep his promise.
Okay, Reza Marashi, thank you very much for coming in. From Iran to North Korea.